Hi guys, welcome back to episode 13. 13 of the podcast, and lucky for some. I think 13's pretty lucky for me. I think, hopefully. Today is like a super cool episode. I've been really excited about this episode. We're doing a one-off. Might be a one-off. You never know. It might come back again in the future sometime. But this is the special video game episode of the Help I'm a Camera Nerd podcast. So for one podcast only, we become the Help I'm a Video Game Nerd podcast. So, yeah. We've got so much to talk about, I feel like. Both me and Anderson love video games. Our friendship started around video games and our love for video games. Yeah. So I know I've been into video games for a long time, but tell me, Anderson, like, when did you get into video games? What was it that kicked it off for you?
I think when my brother, he was in sixth grade, because I'm from America originally. So I was in sixth grade. He was in sixth grade, and he got a Super Nintendo as a gift for doing well on his grades. And he got a Super Nintendo. This is like 1996. So he got a Super Nintendo with the Donkey Kong Country pack. So it was like, obviously Super Nintendo had been out for a few years at that point. I wouldn't remember when it came out. I was like 3. It came out in 1991. And then when Donkey Kong Country came out with the pre-recorded graphics that looked 3D in a 2D space, it was like, whoa, it was almost like a relaunch of the console. And so my brother got that for a gift. And then 6 months later, my oldest brother bought a PlayStation 1 with Wipeout. What else was it? A few other games. And that we had. And so, yeah, I've been in video games since I was like 5. And yeah, video games, they've evolved and changed over the course of the last 25 years, 26, 30 years, really. And seeing how they've changed and now becoming more immersive with storytelling being a key part of that has been really incredible to see and be a part of.
Yeah.
Be a part of? I haven't made any video games. What am I saying? To enjoy. I should be a part of. I make video games in my life. Just play them. Yeah.
I think...
What about you, Mark? What about you?
Well, it's interesting that you said about your brother, like you and your brother kind of, playing video games together, because I feel like growing up with video games, it was even though there wasn't many multiplayer games, it was still quite a collaborative experience. Like, I remember playing through the first Tomb Raider with my dad. Like, my dad worked nights, so he would like come home in the morning and start playing Tomb Raider, same save file, and I would get up for school and he would be asleep in the chair with like the remote control and the Tomb Raider game paused, and I would like play it when I got back from school, and then he would take over and stuff. And even when I was a kid, like, playing with friends, like, you just sit and watch your friends play video games, and then you would have a go, and then it would be their turn and stuff. And I guess it's kind of interesting how the industry's developed now to people playing online together, because back then you would still play together in a room, but it was a different kind of playing together. And I mean, yeah, I started playing video games on like the old BBCs, and I had a Mega Drive was my first computer, like not a Mega Drive, sorry, an Amiga 1200, I think it was. Oh, wow. My dad convinced me to get the Amiga because he was like, you'll get all the games for the Mega Drive, but it's just cheaper. So it was like and then I remember probably when I was around 8 getting a Mega Drive, and it just kind of took off from there. I remember I got the PlayStation quite late. I didn't get the PlayStation. I was a bit of a Sega like fanboy. I remember taking my Mega Drive and trading it in. Yeah. I had the Sega Saturn.
Wow.
And I traded in like my Mega... Yeah. Sega Saturn.
I forgot about that console.
When I got the Sega Saturn, like, I traded in my Mega Drive. I remember there was an Eclipse at the time. I traded in my Mega Drive with like all of the games, 10 games or something. And I got barely anything for it because you never get money for trading in things. They rip you off so much. And I got this Sega Saturn, and it was like having an arcade in my house. I remember bringing it home and just being like almost overwhelmed by 3D graphics and just like this game that I could play over and over again without having to put like, I don't know, 10p in.
Well, it was like Virtua Fighter was like the main. I remember Virtua Fighter was,
yeah.
I remember seeing that and being like, but then PlayStation had Tekken, We had Tekken at I'm like, sorry, PlayStation had Tekken at the time.
The
That was
console
like the battle
wars.
of the. Sorry, I
Yeah.
used to be a Sony fanboy, guys. So sorry.
Yeah, I mean it was the better console. I eventually got a Sony. Yeah, I mean I probably shouldn't say this, but I got a modded Sony console when I was younger, and yeah, naughty.
FBI
But you know we
disclaimer right now.
but we got original games. Like that wasn't a big factor in the games that I played, and you could trade the games in. I remember being like, you know, it was a local video game shop. You could go in, you could play the games first, you could trade them in and stuff. You were just on like a first name basis with shops back then. I know, like, I don't think you can try games in game. Like, I don't think you can go in and say, can I play this first? They'll be like, no, you can't. But back then, I remember they had the console set up and you could go to the front of the shop and I'd be like playing this video game for 5 minutes and then be like, yeah, it's pretty good. I'll trade this game in, and you take like the game and trade it in. Always trading in, never like buying games outright. You just trade a game in all the time.
Man.
I feel like.
Well, I didn't discover the trading in games until I came here. We had like GameStop. Well, then to be fair, I was too young, really, back in the States to not too young to buy games, but it was my brother's consoles and stuff, man. But like, it's when I came here, and and you had Game Station, because back home we had back in America we had GameStop, and GameStop when I got back when I was older, we would trade games in, but like when I was younger, all my games got bought at Toys R Us, because I got my first console ever was a Game Boy Color, a purple one. It got stolen actually at school, and it got stolen, and I had to wait like 6 months to get another one. Got a green one that I don't know what happened to that. Probably in storage somewhere, in my parents' storage. But like that one was awesome. I had Zelda, Pokemon Red.
Pokemon, yeah.
Pokemon Red was like the greatest game in my life up to that point. And really, if you think about it, story for me, engaging with story started with that. You know, with you choosing your character, choosing the name.
Yeah.
And then
Who'd you pick?
on the journey. I mean, I always pick my name. I always put my name Andy.
No, but what was your starter Pokemon in Pokemon Red? Charizard. I was also I was Charizard. Pokemon Red.
Chameleon, Charmander. Sorry, I always picked him because I thought, because his pictures on the side of it, it'll be a better, more optimal choice to go for that. But sorry, I cut you off when you're talking about trading in games. I just thought I'd jump in there. Optimal choice.
I feel like you've got. I mean, who wouldn't pick the dragon? Like out of all those Pokemon, who are you gonna? I'm gonna pick the dragon, right? Because he was like in the Pokemon series the best.
A massive turtle with water cannons is pretty awesome too, I gotta say.
I suppose, but always, I mean, it's always been the same for me. Whenever a Pokemon game has come out, it's always been like Charmander as my starting Pokemon, because I just want to get to Charizard and have that overpowered fire Pokemon that just annihilates everyone.
That wasn't a flying type. If you remember, it was just a fire type. It wasn't a flying type. Yeah. I don't even think you could fly with it. So you always had to get like Pidgeotto in terms of Pidgeot. No. And sorry, guys, I'm a dork for this stuff. But like Mark, I mean, like obviously, we're storytellers now as in our adult life.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
and we bonded at university, over some sports games. Is less, FIFA 08, what a game. But then also, how did you feel like the stories in video games inspired you with your film choices, or at least your imagining film ideas? Did they have any influence on you?
They have to, right? Because I would go through these stages. I mean, you have to talk about Metal Gear Solid, really, for me. Oh, yeah. That was like the first game that, not the first game with a story, but the first game that I just played over and over again. Like I completed it and I recompleted it. I probably completed that game like 10, 15 times. And those games would definitely influence like my movie choices, because sometimes I would play a game, like I'd play GoldenEye for the 64, and then I rented out GoldenEye and watched it the movie and stuff. And that's, still today, like that happens to me when I play video games. I played Red Dead Redemption, got really into Red Dead Redemption 2, and all of a sudden I was really into like Western films, which I'd never been into before. It is, and even more so now, I think, because, video games are heavily influenced a lot of the time by movies. So when you play those video games, you're usually getting more references from movies, and then I'll go away and I'll watch the movies that have inspired the game. And it's like this cycle, and it's like, I think that's the thing that draws you right to video games in some way, is that like it's this cycle of just storytelling, visual storytelling. And, games, I think eventually will probably, overtake movies in terms of storytelling, because, video games give me something that I don't get from movies, which a lot of the time is like that experience, that first-hand experience, and sometimes even having an impact on the outcome of the story.
Yeah.
So it is like, it's just this cycle of video games inspire me to watch movies, and movies inspire me to kind of want to play video games in this weird way that, and I feel like I'd love to work in video games. I don't know what my job would be. I don't think there's necessarily much need for like a camera operator or a cinematographer, maybe lighting design or something. But I've always thought that if I didn't work in movies, I would love to work in video games.
Interesting.
Yeah, I mean,
interesting. I mean, it's. I won't fully agree with games overtaking movies, and I'll tell you why. It's just a different experience. Right. And I mean, I remember a point where they had two different types. They started tailoring the difficulty in certain games so that more people could just get through it to experience that story. So some people were purchasing, certain video games just to play the story, and they wanted an easy mode so they can get the story that everyone's talking about. But as a gamer, that doesn't sit well with you, because it's like you need to have the challenge of, it's a game. It needs to be, I need to feel like I've overcome something. So, and also it's a certain type of story being told, whether it's a blockbuster movie, or horror thriller, even a, space fantasy. It's very much those type of stories, right? Which are amazing. They're the popcorn stories, really. Even the more acclaimed ones, it's still a popcorn blockbuster story, i.e. The Last of Us, right? But it's still sometimes when you want those more emotionally grounded stories, and I know Last of Us does that to a great extent, but you also, it's just different kinds, but it's just a different type of audience and a different type of story, because having that interactive storytelling, I think, is really amazing. But it's never worked in movies, and it only works in games. But then when games they can get it wrong sometimes. So funny you mentioned Metal Gear. The Metal Gear Solid series is some of the greatest video games ever created. I love Metal Gear Solid 1. Everybody remembers the controller. Sorry, my neighbors are making noise. But I remember you having to, for Mantis, you'd have to change the controller over, and it was crazy. And then, like in Metal Gear Solid 2, it doppelgang. It does a quick switch on you, because you're playing with Raiden the entire game. And in Metal Gear Solid 3, I didn't play Metal Gear Solid 3, but Metal Gear Solid 4, come on, I think one of the most visceral video games ever made, when you think of like even the sounds of like the machine guns and stuff like that. But Metal Gear Solid 4, we know Metal Gear was probably the pioneer in movie storytelling in a video game. But Metal Gear Solid 4, I always remember the last hour I was just watching the game, and I didn't enjoy it. I mean, people won't admit that. And
you couldn't skip it.
You couldn't skip it. We're watching I'm like watching a wedding scene. I'm like, what are we doing here? What are we doing? I put the controller down an hour ago. And, Hideo Kojima, one of the greatest video game designers ever, he really needs to just make a movie. And I think, I would argue he's a bit of a coward, because he could just make a movie, but he's hiding behind video games a little bit, especially that last Metal Gear. He's just make a movie. Just make a movie, and let's see if the story holds up in a movie form. So, but that's for me when it gets it wrong. Whereas you have, for me, the best video game I have ever played in my life, Uncharted 2, where you are experiencing this Indiana Jones-esque story, but modern day, and you are convinced, you are compelling the action. I always think of the sequence when we're in the Himalayas and we're jumping from truck to truck to truck, and the game design is so perfect that you think you're jumping on the trucks at that right time when really it's just a scripted sequence, but you believe that you're like, oh, I've got this last second, the truck's about to blow up, let me jump to the next one, and then to the next one. And for me, I mean, obviously, Uncharted 4 has surpassed that, and obviously thinking sequences of Uncharted 4. But I always remember Uncharted 2 being the first, like, whoa, this is a movie that I'm playing and I'm being a part of.
Yeah.
So that's when they get it perfectly right. And obviously, Naughty Dog have even so much propelled themselves so much. And just before I let you go, I let you make your point. I always remember when Uncharted 1 came out, and it was 2007, and the PlayStation was a bit behind. The PlayStation 3 was a bit behind the Xbox in sales and all that stuff, because I used to keep up with that kind of thing, because I used to care. Don't ask me why, but I did. And I always remember people saying, if Uncharted is meant to be the Sony's Halo, it's never going to work. It's only 8 out of 10. And they all criticized it, because it was just not enough. It was set in this jungle. And Uncharted 1 was a wonderful game. Uncharted Drake's Fortune. Fast forward to Uncharted 2. That game won Game of the Year, everything. And then now you talk about Uncharted 4, which came out, I think, 2016 on the PlayStation 4. Nobody's even talking about Halo. Uncharted was the standard of action video games, to the point where no one was even talking about, wondering about Halo. They were saying, we're just glad we had this experience. So it's interesting how sometimes things change. And, as with every medium, new players come into it that no one expect to really innovate with the storytelling. And it's like movies. New filmmakers come, and we have the established ones with their established styles, and these new filmmakers come and they create a new style. Sorry, I had to go on that monologue about Naughty Dog, because obviously, wow, Uncharted, what a bunch of game, what a great game.
You do have to talk about Naughty Dog. I'm going to jump back real quick just to Hideo Kojima and say I actually really enjoyed Metal Gear Solid 5 as an engine of what you could do. The story obviously didn't, there was something there that happened, it didn't get finished, whatever. I'm a big fan of Death Stranding as a game, even though it is just a delivery simulator, but I actually really enjoyed completing that game and playing through it. Yeah. I like Hideo Kojima a lot. I'm excited to see what he does next. But let's go back to Naughty Dog, because Naughty Dog, obviously, like you said, Uncharted 2 especially, like, there is nothing wrong with scripting. I have friends that will say that scripting in video games is BS and it's just rubbish, and that ruins the video game. And they like, essentially the game they want is a game with options, and you can pick the options. If we go back to like early days Deus Ex, they want an objective with many ways to complete it. Yeah. Now, I have no problem with scripting, providing that you don't know it's scripted as it's happening. Like, you can obviously objectionally look at a train being destroyed and be like, well, that train is being destroyed. There's only so many ways. They have to get you off it via a certain route. However, the thing that, Uncharted does in all of its game, well, Naughty Dog does in all of its games, is it makes you feel like you've picked that choice.
Exactly.
Now they put in like options. I don't know if you've ever watched. There's a series on YouTube where you basically there's people that are out there playing The Last of Us Part 2 and stuff, and showing you the minor differences that happen depending on your choices. And it's not a big difference. It's a very small thing. It's a character saying something different or something like that based on what decision you make. So it's like it's always going to have the same outcome, but the events are slightly changing depending on what you're choosing to do, or the character's dialogue is changing depending on what you choose to do and stuff. And Red Dead Redemption 2 for me was a game that delivered story without. I know a lot of people have a problem with it being too long and like the traveling situation, but I just found that game to deliver the story and story elements to me as I was playing it without me having to like look at a guide online or explore like extravagant parts of the map. And I would just be doing something and you would hear a noise in the bushes and you would go into the bushes and this little narrative would unfold. And it was like, and that really had an effect on me playing that game. I was just completely drawn into it. And I just wanted to keep playing it because these weird little situations would just happen on a whim.
I tell you what, though, a game that did that for me, because I mean, I played Red Dead, and I have to, and my favorite word the last podcast was caveat, so I'm gonna caveat with this.
Yes, yeah, you were.
And my caveat. So,
Yeah.
look, I don't play anywhere near as much video games as I used to. I just don't, with 2 kids, especially one that likes to complain that he doesn't have a turn when I'm playing. It's very difficult. So, and obviously the type of games you play is different. But going back, so if the my references are all pre 2015, that is why. So I remember the experience I had with the game that gave me loads of options in terms of story, character development. Fallout 3 by Bethesda. I remember that came out in 2008, and I wasn't sure about it. It was this retro 1950s, but in the future, it's retro 1950s, but set in like 2077 or 2020 or 2277. Yeah, the bombs dropped in 2077, and that game, the options, the world. Yes, it was buggy and janky at times. But you felt like you were doing all sorts of things. You had that map of Washington D.C. And then you're siding with this clan, and then this clan, and then to get the Brotherhood, to get the armor in the front of the game, you had to join the Brotherhood. And that game, I remember playing. I think I had 50 hours in like 3 weeks. Incredible options, and the story was quite engrossed because, and the thing about video games that do it so well. They engross you in the story universe, the world, the lore, right? And so you're trying to explore these made up worlds a bit more. Like in a movie, you can't do that. You can't go like, oh, let me choose. What would they choose that way? And it was such a wonderful experience to do that, to have that, and you felt so immersed in there, to the point where you finish playing, you're like, oh wow, oh is it? Let me make sure outside's not got green mushroom clouds. Okay, good. It's fine. You're so immersed in that, and I remember that game it did that. I liked Red Dead. I never played Red Dead 2 because, again, time was out of the essence. But like I always remember Fallout 3 being that experience, and then I tried to play Fallout 4, and again I tried and I loved it, but then, kids. So it's like, man, and I think that was the thing that I loved it. Bethesda games, really good job, and I wasn't aware. And the thing about it at the time, people made it seem like, oh yeah, you didn't play Fallout 2 on the PC. I was like, no, I didn't. Who did? But they did. I mean, obviously, tons of people did because they were able to make but enough that they made a Fallout 3 10 years after.
Yeah.
Right? And I was just so fascinated, and the story made me go back and say, what happened to the rest of the world? What happened to, California, which I think the first 2 games I'd read that were set in, or the California Republic. And then New Vegas came out, which is more or less like a souped up DLC. Well, no, that's not fair. It was another episode in another area. So the same exact game, but in a different area. And New Vegas was even more options, even more variety there. Really, yeah. And I think that's the beauty of stories and video games. You're motivated to find more because there's a story reason of why that particular weapon you're using, or why this boss is like this, or why did that clan why did they turn out that way. You read little bits of story in the that you find in like a certain level, or a certain area, and then you read like
Yeah.
a diary note, and there's so much depth there, and you have so much respect for the designers and storytellers of this game. But there is other games that and some people would say the story wasn't that good, and maybe because I intrinsically link it with the launch of the PS3, or at least the first trailer.
Of course, yeah. A lot of controversy around that trailer.
But I've got to say, Killzone 1 and 2, I really, really thought it was so fascinating. Because essentially it was World War II in space. But I love the characters and the performances by those characters. I think their general, or the Helghast, which was like space Nazis.
Yeah.
The general was played by, or not general, their leader was Scholar Vasari. And his performance, and you know me, I love like these operatic villains. I love them. I love to root against them. And Brian Cox of obviously Succession and every other thing, Born Supremacy.
Yeah.
Born Identity. He played that character, Scholar Vasari, and I just thought, wow, I'd never seen someone of that level of performance in a game. And that was 2005, I think Killzone 1 came out, and then Killzone 2 came out 2009. And you really felt set this world up. Yes, I know it wasn't Halo, as they keep telling us. I preferred it. It was more grounded and more gritty, real. But again, that it just, that wasn't real. So in space, yeah, it's real. They're fighting space Nazis that deformed because they were left on this colony that wasn't really ideal for human life, and that's why their eyes, they have to wear those glasses, and why the skin is pale. But again, I'm remembering that story because there's a reason for it, and you're immersed in that. Even though it wasn't a perfect game, I really enjoyed this. The third one was a waste of time. They made a mistake by killing Scholar Vasari. They focused on the wrong people. The characters are the wrong people. Blah blah blah. Sorry. Yeah, I'm going to Killzone 2. I could have wrote a better Killzone 3, but yeah. Sorry.
Maybe one. I always hear rumblings of a new Killzone game. I think people are pining for like there to be a return. There's always this like pining now for things that never got the kind of the sign off that they deserve to get that sign off. I want to, it's funny, like story now is just, it's so easy to deliver in video games, isn't it? But like, I remember a time in video games where like, a cutscene was almost a reward after playing the game for a long time. Like the first Tomb Raider, there wasn't a lot of cutscenes and you would play hours and hours of game. And the reward for playing those hours was, here's a 40-second cutscene with a bit of talking. And that was like, and now it feels like we're at the level where it's, there's so much talking in games. Sometimes I'm skipping, and I never would have skipped a cutscene or anything in the past. And it's almost like for some games, story is taken over, and you kind of forget that, like you said, there still needs to be a game there. There's still, and I think like going back to Naughty Dog, and Uncharted is there. There's the story, which is fantastic, but then there's these gameplay elements where it's like, okay, here's Nathan Drake in a scenario where he's got to climb, explore, get to a certain point, and then here's these scenarios where he's fighting, and that's where those games allow you to essentially tackle that scenario how you want. Like with The Last of Us, when you go into a clicker section, it's like, right, I can't just run and gun this. These clickers, they're going to kill me easily. So you've got to be smart about it. It's like, how can I get through? Do I want to sneak through? Do I want to kill as few clickers as possible and just try and conserve ammunition and stuff? Or do I just want to kill them all and then loot everywhere and get what I can? And like, that's like what you said. It's separating the game from the movie, is that like you still spend a large portion of a game playing it and playing the mechanics and exploring and unlocking and discovering. And some games, maybe there is too much essential like fluff on top, and I think that's what Naughty Dog do so well, is they get the balance. I mean, I love Uncharted 4. I have played through that game so many times.
Wonderful
like
game, man.
because
Wow.
yeah, it's stunning. It's like, it's Indiana Jones, right? It's the closest you're going to get to being Indiana Jones, essentially. And all of the games they've made, I still could go back and play. I've got the Uncharted collection, and every now and then I'll go right back to Uncharted 1, and it's fun to kind of see how the game has progressed and how the characters have progressed. But the thing that they do well is they just write characters that you emotionally invest in.
Exactly.
And,
Exactly.
you just love to watch them.
I think.
And yeah, Nathan Drake is like, there's just something about him. I don't know what it is, but you genuinely connect with him, and you genuinely connect with the other characters that are in those games, and
He's
they
a
just do
guy's
it so
guy.
well.
He's a guy's guys. Him and Sully, they're guys.
Yeah, yeah.
It's about the writing again, just like film. You write these characters and people are invested in them. They're invested in their character journey, what they're learning, how they're growing. You feel it when you both don't want to get killed in the video game because you're that character, but you like that character. You're like, oh man, I let Drake down this time by falling off that random cliff, and but like, yeah, you think of you think of Nathan Drake, you think of Sully, you think of Chloe, his girlfriend, Lena, his wife.
Yep.
You think of these characters and you're really into them, and they really, you invested in their journey. And I think that's what Naughty Dog, and I think was it Anne Henning? Anne Henning was the first. I'm probably butchering her name, but she then moved on to a Star Wars video game that never got made. But she had always like, the writing is the key, just like you would do with any film of these characters, which is why I think a lot of filmmakers, or at least writers, have started to move into video games, because they're able to write these characters, but they're not all able to get them right because, sometimes they really, at the detriment of the game, they're trying to focus on this characters, all this and their motivations and whatnot. And in reality, it's like, it's got to get back to a video game. It's got to get back to a game. It's got to get back to a game. And I think, yeah, video games are at an interesting point now because as we're merging the two technologies, like we're seeing with Unreal, virtual production, we've all seen The Mandalorian in LED screens. We get it. It's, Unreal Engine. We get it. But the thing about it, as we're seeing those merge of the technologies, because in ways the budget should come down to make these type of expansive stories in film, which means the stories that were only possible in video games, because again, a video game, the budgets to make these video games are much less than the top movies, or they were. I know Grand Theft Auto is a different ball game, but like Uncharted, if Uncharted 4 was a 4-part series, as a TV show, to have those expansive action scenes and those stunts, you're talking a Mission Impossible movie times $4 billion.
Yeah.
But to make the game with the same emotional impact, I feel I would compare any Uncharted to flipping
easily
Mission Impossible Fallout, which is an amazing action film. Yeah. But it's like, there was so much of that, like even in the new Mission Impossible, spoiler alert, guys, I'm gonna say, there's a bit where he's about to a train. There's a train he's trying to climb up on. I'm like, that's straight out of Uncharted. This is straight out of Uncharted. Yeah. And it was impressive, but I wasn't as impressed because I've played this and I've controlled the character doing that, climbing up just as something's about to fall down. Oh, but as those two technologies merge, and I know, they claim they do a lot practically in Mission Impossible, and they do, but there's still a lot of CGI. But as those big technologies merge and we're able to do those kind of expansive stories in film, this is where video games have got to maybe get back to the core value of what it is it's got to be an engaging experience that I care about. Not like trying to force my 2-part Netflix series into this video game because it's like, well, that's just going to get found out. So I think that's really interesting. That's really, really interesting.
Do you know what I think? Like, video games at the minute, we're still doing very similar things to what we were doing like 15 years ago in terms of the gameplay. We're still shooting, we're still controlling a character, in a 3D environment. And I believe that, maybe within the next 10 years, there's going to be this evolving of video games, you know, where you AI, obviously AI is affecting everything. It's going to eventually make its way into video games in a different, it's already there in terms of like graphically and, you know, enhancing graphics and stuff. But when we get to a point where you can communicate with characters within the game, maybe that's talking, maybe you've got, you know, we've all got mics on the controllers these days. When you're answering a character in a video game and that is responding to you based on what your answer is, you're going to start forming connections with video game characters, and the video game industry will change, you know, and that's maybe when it's going to, you know, infringe a little bit more on the movie side of things, just because you'll always want to sit down and just consume without having to give, right? That's how a lot of us, you know, at the end of a day, you don't want to have to work for it. So I'm not saying that movies are going to disappear, but when video games get to that next level where it's, you know, it's evolved beyond just like shooting, it becomes a genuine detective story, you know, and rather than like just going and finding clues within the game, you're talking to characters, and you're like, you know, LA Noire kind of did this a little bit, tried, and you're questioning characters, you're trying to figure out who's lying, or you're forming those connections that Uncharted has done for you with its amazing acting. And, you know, you can't not talk about The Last of Us, because like I don't think any game has got me to the places that The Last of Us has got me emotionally into. Like, that took me on a journey, both 1 and 2. I love them, you know, fantastic, amazing games. It's like when someone reads a good book or watches a good movie and they're like, you've never watched that movie, you should watch it. I always think when I meet people that don't play video games, I'm like, I just can't believe you've never experienced The Last of Us. Like, and then the series came out and everyone went crazy, and I'm like, yeah. yeah.
Everybody
it's
got
amazing.
worried about like,
Imagine...
this virus could actually happen. Oh,
yeah. So it's like they just, yeah. There are games that have just taken me on an emotional journey that you can only really get from playing a video game. You know, you can certainly be connected to characters emotionally watching a film or a series, but there is something about having that, like, controlling and achieving, like you said, you know, it's about becoming good at something and feeling like you've gotten that character there rather than just watching that character get there. And when we get to the next step, when, you know, games genuinely are affected by our outcome and stuff, I think that it's just going to change things, right? It's going to be
AI generated
crazy.
But the other thing is, I've noticed something, and in every other industry, it kind of goes in waves like this. I think video games has matured as this audience has, because I don't think younger people play video games for the story like we did. Like, I don't know if Metal Gear Solid 1 comes out now, even with the updated graphics. Sorry, cut that out. I don't think if Metal Gear Solid came out now, it would do as well. And it's because, you know, if you look at the games kids play now, you know, obviously Fortnite for a while. But then also social media is infringing on that, because I don't know how much, obviously everything's around Twitch. People watch people play games. It's more about competitive. Yeah. It's more about the visceral game, which is why, like, Fortnite was the biggest game for so many years, when it was like, there's no story to this. It's just nonsense. You know, it's Warhawk, basically, which is what I will say. I will go on that hill of Warhawk did exactly what Fortnite did, but it did it like 10 years before, and nobody played it because it was on PlayStation 3. Rant over. But we
played it.
The reality is, as the audience changes and our time changes, what I appreciate more is a game that I could put down and pick up a week, 2 weeks, 2 months later, and not feel like I've lost that massive curve. I don't think we've reached there yet, because I think our age range, and I'm talking, you know, 40 to 30, or 40 to 25, we're the ones who grew up with this. We're the ones that made it acceptable playing video games as adults. You know, our parents, what is a video game? They still think it's a kid's game. The reason why some parents buying their kids Call of Duty and Grand Theft Auto. It's because they think of it, it's a toy. It's a game. A video game is just for fun. But it's like, no, there's a reason it says 18. There's a reason this is only for adults. There's adult themes in this. This is not, just because it's on a child's play video game console doesn't mean it's for kids. But what you're finding is, I'm wondering whether the audience even cares when it comes to the massive hits about the story as much. I'm not so sure. I wonder if you look at, one game I wish that I had a console, wish I had an Xbox for, was this new Starfield, by Bethesda that's coming out for the Xbox. And I mean, that looks like right up my street. You go into different worlds, different options, all that kind of stuff. Wow. It's what Mass Effect should have been. But the reality is, I bet you the numbers of people buying that game is going to be between the 45 and 30. People younger than that, teenagers won't be buying that game in mass. I guarantee it, because they'll be too busy.
Well, it's on Game Pass. It's going straight to Game Pass. Well, so you just subscribe to Game Pass. What's that, like £10 a month? And you get that game on launch straight to Game Pass.
But I don't have an Xbox Series X, and I won't get one because Microsoft isn't. But like, I just think and again, we're just dabbling to video games, guys. We're not doing deep analysis on the video game market. Go to IGN, GameStop, Kotaku. Does Kotaku still exist? I need to check. Does that Kotaku still exist? Go to them if you really want to. Focus.
N4G is where I go, which is kind of become this place where there's a lot of ads now. It's
where? Sorry.
Yeah. N4G. I'm sure you.
Oh yeah, N4G. Yeah, N4G. News for gamers. I do check up on that every now and again. That and VG charts. Yeah. No, not anymore. Anymore. But like, I mean, yeah. I mean, video games are. I think, look. More and more, they're more accessible than ever before. Obviously, if you have time, great. If you don't, it's you won't experience the stories. I think of one story that I think is an incredible in a video game, God of War. In terms of, obviously, it's all mythical or whatever, but just the journey of the father and son, and it's done in such a mature way. I'm thinking, wow. I mean,
a game that could probably change genre, right? Successfully.
Oh yeah,
well. It's like
the previous ones were nothing to do. You weren't playing that because you're watching an extensive story. You were playing that as a rage. You were in a rage, and you were like, "I'm angry. I want to play this game." And for some people, I think maybe they should have been playing it because you're anger mad therapy. But man, it changed. But then it matured as we've matured. I wouldn't play God of War 1 and 2 now. Like, no way. I mean, like, this is just slashing stuff. He's just angry. He's done all this to himself. What an idiot. But God of War 4 or God of War New 1 is such a mature, and I'm like, wow. It's grown up with me. Crazy.
Yeah. It is a game that there's so many games that we haven't had time to talk about that are just amazing. God of War. We didn't even mention Gears of War, which we played through quite a few of those together. Yeah. I mean, there are so many games. There's too many to talk about in one podcast. But yeah, it's I'll never grow out of video games. I think I don't get as much time to play them as I'd like to anymore. But I'll never stop playing them because it's just. It's the second thing that I care about, watching films and playing video games. The ultimate nerd really is what I am, and I'm so excited for what's next.
What's coming? Yeah.
For video games.
You know what, man? Yeah. I mean, I love video games. Just the video games I play changes. My taste in games has changed dramatically. Or what I look at the world in a slightly different way now. So it's like, that's a bit too violent for me. I can't be bothered to play this murder simulator. It's like me younger. It's like, get him! Yeah! Now I'm thinking like, man, that guy's, it's his job. He's just here on a last contract. He's called his wife and been like, babe, it's the last contract that I'm getting out of PMC, and I promise you. And then we're just like, snipe, get him. I know, but it's a video game. But that's how. So I mean, but the thing is, video games they're incredible, man. Incredible worlds they create and celebrate, man. Man. But we should wrap things up, shouldn't we?
I think you should wrap it up. Let's wrap it up.
So guys, thanks again guys and gals. Thanks for listening to this week's Help I'm a Camera Nerd podcast. Well, Help I'm a Video Game Nerd podcast, guys. Thanks again for joining us. We love your support. Remember to like and subscribe and comment. Guys, we want to hear what you think about what we're talking about. What are your top games? Are there any games that influenced you in how you watch movies and anything like that? Just leave them in the comments, guys. We'd love to get involved and talk to you guys further in the comments. But then like and subscribe and share the podcast. Share the podcast. If you haven't got time to watch us on YouTube, you can see us. You can listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. Just make sure you go on those apps and you click subscribe. But guys, until the next time, stay playing games, stay shooting. Peace out.